Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Huawei headquarters. I'm Sophie Zhou from Huawei and I'm thrilled to be your MC for today's panel, A Coffee with Ren. As you may know, Huawei's culture is very open and we always embrace the exchange of ideas. These are interesting times for Huawei and for global technology. So I think we are in for a good discussion. Before we start, allow me to briefly introduce the panelists and the moderator for today's session. We are honored to have Mr. Nicholas Negroponte, co-founder of the MIT Media Lab and a tech visionary. Mr. George Gilder, futurist, author, and is truly a tech guru. Mr. Ren Zhengfei, founder and CEO of Huawei, and Ms. Catherine Tian, corporate senior vice president and director of the board at Huawei. Last but important, Ms. Tian will be our moderator. She is the host of the popular talk show World Insight with Tian on CGTN. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor to the panelists and moderator. Let's welcome them onto the stage.
Hello and welcome to A Coffee with Ren. I'm Tian. They say a good conversation could be just like drinking a cup of black coffee, as stimulating and probably as hard. Well, I'm not sure whether today's conversation is going to be a really difficult one, but certainly stimulating intellectually and thought-provoking if you take a look at the panelists on the stage. They are trailblazers in their respective fields and certainly very outspoken about the challenges that we are facing today. I hope it's a conversation among minds without borders. First up, A Coffee with Ren, so let's start with Ren. Ren Zhengfei, founder and CEO of Huawei. Of course, a legendary entrepreneur from China who has made China one of the leaders of 5G in the world. Huawei now, as far as I understand, is the largest manufacturer of telecommunication equipment and the second largest maker of smartphones. So, Mr. Ren, welcome. On his right, Nicholas Negroponte. The reason why I introduced Mr. Negroponte the second place is because he has just accepted Mr. Ren as his student. Big news. A tech visionary and the co-founder, together with Jeremy Weisner of the MIT Media Lab. Certainly, he's been providing funding for startup companies around the world, including Wired Magazine and Sohu, and he has also decided to devote the remainder of his time, which is a lot, to open science and global connectivity. Good to see you, sir. Nicholas. Next, we have George Gilder, a fun person, certainly, a tech guru and a futurist, according to many. George has been the most quoted living author by Ronald Reagan, and certainly has been a venture capitalist in the US and Israel on many important projects. He enjoys his moment as a runner and also as a skier. George, good to see you.
Great to be here.
Last but certainly not least, we have a wonderful lady sitting on the stage as well. long-time commitment to Huawei, 25 years working for this company, and a colleague of Mr. Ren, Ms. Catherine Chen, Senior Vice President and Director of the Board of Huawei. Welcome. Okay, so a coffee with Ren, I really need to start with Mr. Ren. 任先生，是不是不能去美国了？
Mr. Ren,
所以把好朋友都
can you
叫
still
到
go
中
to
国
the
来喝
US?
咖啡
Is it
了
because you cannot go to the US, so you
can't
have
go to the
all
US
the
anymore,
friends coming
that's
to
why you bring
China?
all your friends to China for coffee?
尼古拉斯先生呢是乔布斯的老师。
Professor Nicholas Negroponte is a teacher of Steve Jobs, and his son goes to the same school with Steve Jobs. So today he takes me as a student. That makes me also a student, a fellow student with Steve Jobs. That makes me so honored.
What about George? 那 George 呢？
How about George?
是呢，他给那个我们黄老师写了一本书，写了序言。我读了那个价值为纲那个序言，英文版的价值为纲那个序言写得非常好，我非常崇拜他。
George 好开心。
啊，对。
Didn't translate.
It
but that's
translates.
okay.
Okay. He has a lot of respect for you because you write a preface for an important book that he values really,
Okay.
and he has a lot of respect as a result. And it's good to see you and also meet you intellectually.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I first want to protest. This is not coffee.
So they got you tea over here.
Tea, yeah, tea.
But didn't you say you have too many coffee today already? Okay. But I want to turn the table to both of you here. Aren't you being afraid of being politically incorrect? Coming to China and sitting here in the sitting room of Huawei while knowing what's going on between US and China?
No, I think that I can contribute to saving the United States in this from a terrible mistake that it's currently making, epitomized by their stupid bans and tariffs and restrictions on Huawei. But also, I can contribute to reconstruction of internet architecture to address the terrible security collapse across the internet that makes everybody paranoid and nobody trusts anybody else. And it's really a technical problem that Huawei can address, not a political problem.
Are we facing a technical problem or a political problem, Nicholas?
I am more of the feeling that we're facing a cultural problem. And I'm here for a different reason. And I invited myself to come here and even told Mr. Wrenn what day I could come. And it was surprising that George, whom I've known for 40 years, was here on the same day. So I'm very
And
pleased.
who do not agree with you on any of the subjects?
We don't agree on political issues.
What do we disagree on?
Oh, George. At any rate, but we agree on the fact that the United States is making a terrible mistake. First of all, picking on a company. I was on the Motorola board of directors for 15 years. One of the first joint ventures you did was probably with Motorola. I suspect it was. And my interest is open information, open science. I come from a world where what we value isn't so much trade and commerce and stock values. We value knowledge, and we want to build on the people before. And the only way this works is if people are open at the beginning, and we can all build on each other. And that's, to me, the priority. There are other issues, and I'm not denying them, but that's the one I'm focused on. How does the world collaborate It's not a competitive world in the early stages of science. It benefits from collaboration.
任先生。
Mr. Ren, someone says it is a technical issue and some believe it's a cultural issue. Then what do you think? What kind of issue are we facing here? I think the ultimate goal for the human society is to create wealth, so more people can be alleviated from poverty. And of course, the theme of the world is collaboration. All countries work together. That is possible in the information era. However, in industrial era, there were transportation problems, and limited by that, the geopolitics came into being. A country can single-handedly manufacture a tractor or some kind of machine. However, in the information era, it is impossible for a country single-handedly manufacture any piece of technology. So the world is definitely working towards open cooperation. Only open cooperation can the world meet the demands of the world and of the people and bring benefit to people. So I believe the fundamental issue the world is facing is that we have to march towards cooperation, open cooperation. That is the only path forward. The economic globalization is proposed by the Western countries, and we believe this is very precise and very correct. There will definitely be ups and downs during the process of economic globalization, and we have to take a correct perspective to look at this issue, analyze this issue, and to address the problems instead of adopting a very extreme measure. And human civilization is built upon scientific discoveries, and then guided by the wisdom of politicians and also the entrepreneurship by business community. That is how we create wealth for mankind. We know there's the medieval dark ages in the past, and 40 to 50 years ago, China was very poor, and people suffered hunger. But now we have abundant supply of food. But the nature is still the nature. The physical environment has not changed. Why we have been able to enjoy abundance? That is because of the science and technology.
听上去非常哲学化啊，但是我问你一个具体的问题。
Allow me to ask you a specific question.
What are you going to do with those American companies who do not provide Huawei anymore components and parts, despite of the fact you had contracts before? 我要问您呢。 如果那些美国公司现在不给你们华为提供原材料了，或者是相关的零配件了，那您以后还要跟他们来往吗？
who decided to suspend the supply to Huawei. All those American companies, they have business integrity and ethics. In the past 30 years, Huawei's development is dependent on the support and cooperation with all these companies around the world. The current setbacks are not caused by those Americans. Instead, it is caused by different perspectives by certain politicians. Well, we realized that when we reach a certain level, when we are very developed, there might be competition, but it didn't occur to us that the U.S. government is so determined to take those extreme measures against Huawei, and it didn't occur to us that they would take such a wide range of measures to limit and restrict Huawei. It is not just the suspension of supply, it is also about limiting us to participate in organizations and our cooperation with American universities, or even we cannot be connected to the network with certain elements of American components. Well, we believe these restrictive measures will not stop our way.
先前的想法。
Regarding our ideas in the past, we did not think it's as severe as we are in today. We've done some preparation. It's like the badly damaged airplane. We only protect our core components like the fuel tanker, not other non-core components. So in the next 2 years, I think we will reduce our capacity. Our revenue will be down by about $30 billion compared to forecast. So our sales revenue this year and next will be about $100 billion. By 2020, we may regain our growth momentum to contribute more to human society. In the next 2 years, we're going to do a lot of switchover of different product versions. That will take time, and that will take time to ramp up, and it will take some time to test whether that works. After that step, we'll be stronger. In the past, when we were not as strong, we were determined to work together with the U.S. companies. In the future, we will be more determined to work with the U.S. companies. We're not afraid of using U.S. components. We're not afraid of using U.S. Elements. And we are open to work together with the U.S. partners. But maybe there are some companies who may be very cautious in using U.S. components or content. That may be a negative thing for U.S. economy. But we're not going to do that for Huawei. We are strong. I think there is no way we can be beaten to death. That's good to hear.
Ms. Chen, did Ms. Ren tell everybody in the company about that, the plan for 2021? 任先生有没有告诉咱们华为所有员工关于2021年这个计划
his plan regarding 2021? Perhaps sometimes he might talk about that, and every time maybe the numbers are not necessarily all the same. Very interesting, this culture and this really chemistry between employees. I feel that very strongly this time. Very interesting.
So what about that? It seems that Mr. Ren gave us a lot of information earlier about the bottom line he's thinking about. George.
Well, I think it's absolutely important that all these new ventures be founded on a level of a ground state of security, on which these innovations can depend, and which make them trustworthy, recognizably trustworthy around the world, because a worldwide network or a worldwide Internet of Things or a worldwide 3D virtual reality Internet, all these various goals, smart cities, all depend on a secure ground state of time-stamped factuality.
We understand that. We understand that security. But
right.
How? That is the issue.
How?
And what about the standards?
Blockchain. Have you heard of it?
Yes, I heard it from your new book.
It's an innovation. Yes. And it's what the new generation of technologists around the world are working on and developing. And I think it should be incorporated in this Huawei plan for the future.
But what about standards? Since we talk about security, since we talk about some specific issues, Mr. Negroponte, what about these issues from your perspective, starting earlier days, thinking already of what's going to happen today? What about standards? Do we have global standards? And how fast can we build the global standard? Do we want to build a global standard?
Well, first of all, I've been doing this so long that when I was first on the internet, I knew everybody else on it. That's how long ago it was. And nobody imagined how it would grow. And if they tell you now they're being revisionists, it was not in any way imagined to be this dominant. And I experienced over my life, first as a teenager, I experienced Sputnik. It's very interesting because Sputnik caused the United States to do things that it wasn't already doing. So this is your Sputnik moment. What the United States has done created Huawei's Sputnik. And you are going to wake up and do things. And there's no going back. I saw it again in the 1980s with Japan. terrified by Japan. And there was a whole period when Japan was this enemy, and we were not supposed to collaborate, and yet that sort of attenuated. So now we're going through a Japan moment in China, and I hope that plays itself out. Standards are important, but not as important as they used to be, partly because you have enough intelligence in the system that you don't have to necessarily have a precise standard that everybody's following, as long as the systems can recognize what it is and say, oh, that's that signal, and adapt itself. So there is a change, but there's importance to collaborate on sort of, let me call it the basis of knowledge, because if we start going in other directions separately, it's going to be an enormous shame, and we should shame in all senses of the word.
Talking about basis of knowledge, I really need to ask Mr. Ren, because right now, Huawei's collaboration with quite a number of American universities and labs have been halted, including some of those where you were originally coming from. And that is not going to contribute to the open science as we speak. But to Mr. Ren, though, it's also going to have a big impact on where Huawei could be in terms of your capacity for science and technology. 华为怎么来面对
How
现在这种
Huawei would
局面呢
address the current situation?
首先，人类的这个社会的创造呢，
First,
分成理
the
论思考
creativity or invention of human society includes theory, engineering, and market-based
中
inventions.
国呢，在工程的
Three different categories. China is very strong when it comes to engineering invention, but not so strong when it comes to theory. When it comes to the research to base science, we should learn from the West in a very down-to-earth way. The West has gone through several hundred of years, like calculus and the invention of many other basic science. I think the West has done tremendously to contribute to human society. For Huawei, we invest heavily into R&D. We have more than 80,000 R&D employees. And yet, mobile communication is not something that Huawei invented. Fiber communication, not Huawei's invention. Mobile internet, not our invention. It's just that we are doing better in those areas than others. We're not inventor of airplane, ships, etc. We invented nothing, basically. When it comes to the invention at a basic level, we have not contributed significantly to society. We focus on engineering capability, and we excel there. Now, we work together with more than 300 universities and also 900 research institutions. We provide our support to them, and hopefully we can contribute to theoretical innovation. We're not there yet. But we will not stop that because of the attack that is imposed on Huawei. We will not give up. We will continue to work hard along that line. Even if some U.S. universities are not with us, there are many others who are working with us, and there are many other non-U.S. universities working with Huawei. Only one or two universities, and they may have their own position right now. It's understandable. It's short term because they don't know us enough. Even more politicians of the U.S. come to Huawei taking a look by themselves. Because in their perception, we may be a campus with a thatched huts, and we have a long tail behind our heads. They see us as a bull in China's shop. But if they come here, look at the innovation, look at the pace of our innovation, I think they would believe that we should be their friend, we should be trusted. Just now, George mentioned just now about a trustworthy network. Huawei is determined to do that, and that determination was included in our business plan. In the next 5 years, we're going to invest $100 billion to reshape the network architecture so that network can be simpler, faster, and more secure, more trustworthy. At the very least, we should be able to meet the standards of GDPR of Europe. If we have some financial challenge right now because what's happening on, we will not reduce our R&D investments. We will maintain our level of investment in R&D to really reinvent ourselves to contribute to human society. Just imagine. In those most poorest areas in Africa, in places stricken by Ebola or AIDS, and in other deep forests, Huawei people are everywhere. You cannot make much money there. We are there because of the vision we held and the commitment we have toward humanity. We have not contributed on theoretical discovery. We should contribute more on serving humanity to compensate for that.
That's a great thing. Also have good market, that's a good thing too, I guess. To you, Mr. Gilder, talking about security earlier, Mr. Ren has mentioned about that. So there are a lot of questions whether Huawei has backdoors. 一会儿我们请任先生也来回应。
Later on, we'll throw this question to Mr. Ren as well.
But to you, whose security is it? Who will guarantee the security? Who are the ones to judge whether one system or another system has security or not?
Well, the question is an objective question, whether a specific telecom system can be tested, whether it is open, whether it can afford to be using the new cryptographic techniques, cryptographic signing of software that can render it inherently trustworthy because it can't be changed gratuitously. There are lots of technical remedies for the kinds of distrust that arises around this catastrophically insecure internet architecture that we find ourselves using today. Just as we have a catastrophically broken monetary system, we got which causes trade wars. We also have a catastrophically broken internet security system. And I think Huawei can contribute. Among all the companies in the world, Huawei is probably best situated to solve both these problems or to pursue that single opportunity.
Is Mr. Gilder having too much hope for Huawei? Is he being too optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I hope he's correct. And there's some evidence that he may be, because our president has already said publicly that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about national security. We don't trade national security. So it's about something else. And this trade war has got to end. And that, I believe, will end sooner rather than later. Crossing my fingers.
Knock the wood. However, Mr. Ren, I have to ask you, you need to respond to that too. 任先生，我们但是也要问您这个
Mr.
问
Ren,
题，
I
到
want
底
to
华
ask
为
you
有没
this
有做
question,
了很多后
whether
门？
Huawei has built backdoors into its equipment, whether there are security issues.
好朋友们
You need to tell our good friends and also all the audience joining us online what's Huawei's position there. First, I think network security and information security are two separate topics that should be separated, because network security is about networks that are supposed to connect all people around the world. They cannot break down, and you should try everything you can to prevent faults and problems. You know, 6.5 billion people have to be connected, and tens of thousands of banks have to be connected. Thousands of small and large businesses have to be connected. Bank transfer among banks, for example, has to be very precise, and you cannot cut short 1 0, or otherwise it's gonna be a big problem. So that's what the networks have to deliver. Huawei takes the responsibility to provide connectivity to more than 3 billion people around the world, supporting bank transfer and others that I mentioned just now. Over the last 30 years, doing business in more than 170 countries, we've proved that our networks are secure. Our networks have not broken down. And then regarding information security, what we'll provide is the information pipeline or the water tap. Smart devices for Huawei are like a water tap, and then the network is like the pipeline. Whether the pipe follows oil or water, that's the responsibility of the content providers and the telecom operators, not equipment providers. Whether there are backdoors in Huawei's equipment, 100% no backdoor in Huawei's equipment. We can sign no backdoor agreement with all governments that are willing to enter into this. Why it cannot be done right now? Because those governments are saying all network equipment vendors have to come on board in signing this no backdoor agreement. So it's more difficult. Then why they do not sign with Huawei first? They can take Huawei as an example, as a role model to negotiate with others. Which countries are we referring to? Many countries, and I've talked to the presidents of many countries about this agreement, and they've discussed about this. When to sign? We have to start from one country anyway, so that others would see, all right, Huawei dares to enter into such agreement that shows Huawei's commitment to no backdoor and its commitment to security. Security and insecurity is a relative term. You know, the thickness of the air in the physical world is like 1,000 kilometers. That's the diameter. But the information cloud in the future will be several thousands in diameter. And there will be potential vulnerabilities. For example, it's a wrong thunder. The thunder does not hit the target that is supposed to hit. And then we should look at the mistakes or vulnerabilities, take measures, and to fix the vulnerabilities, and exert disciplinary measures on those who make the mistakes in the first place. You should not have a groundless speculation to attack others. It's a country ruled by law has to follow the law. Ruling by legislature, I think that's not in the spirit of a law. That's the current, what we see right now. And in the future, vulnerabilities will always be there. In a cloud society, the complexity only grows. There are so much entry points. If everyone is 100% careful that you cannot have any vulnerability, that's a closed mindset. That's not open, that's not progressive.
Just now, I asked Mr. Wrenn which country which proposed to sign the no backdoor agreement, but he has been saying internally that he is a fan of the United States. Does he still say that? Well, I think U.S. is a very advanced country ruled by law. We know that in the past, U.S. was not very developed and advanced, and the Puritans came to the United States and bring the legal system and the rule of law to the United States, and gradually U.S. has become the leading country, a very advanced country. We should learn a lot from that. We are experiencing some minor setbacks, but we cannot hate the country for that. Now we are only looking at a very short piece of the long history of the United States. If we just hate the country for a short period of time in the history, then we'll lag behind. Well,
interesting what Mr. Ren just said. He wants to look at the long stretch of history rather than concentrating on one specific point of time. So exactly what can we learn from history? I mean, you already also talk about history, whether it's Japan or Spartan moment. What can we really learn? They say it's the rule of the jungle anyway.
Well, we can learn by looking at various technologies that were quite invented in the United States and then went elsewhere because we didn't have the industrial, commercial courage and ability to develop them because they took long term. I'll give you two examples. One example is flat panel displays. I had a piece of glass in my laboratory in the early 1970s. It was the beginning of flat panel displays. The United States couldn't bring it forward. It took too much investment, and so it went to Japan and then later other places. The same thing happened with, even before that, videotapes. There was a big commotion when people invented videotapes, and then off they went. We didn't develop. Same things happened with telecommunications. Government funding in my lab stopped 20 years ago, and interest in the telecommunications development went elsewhere. It's not in the United States, so let's say it's in Europe, it's at Ericsson, it's at Nokia, it's at Huawei. It's not really in the United States anymore. So history has shown that the short-term, usually quarter-to-quarter, view of American industry precludes some of these big long-term developments. And Huawei looks beyond that and has witness, to develop things in 5G and other areas that couldn't happen in the way we're set up. It didn't lend itself to small entrepreneurship, and it doesn't lend itself to big American corporations the way they're currently shaped.
Mr. Gilder, many say, wow, probably we are already at the very beginning of a technological Cold War anyway. We're going to have decouple between China and the United States, or between China and some of the other countries technology-wise.
I think
Are you as easygoing about the reality as Mr. Ren, and also as historical as Mr. Negroponte?
Well, I think Mr. Wrenn is right to be complacent. I mean, he's in the strong position. He has the 56,000 patents. He has the this 80,000 R&D employees. He's focused on the technologies of the future. It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple.
Are you doing American bashing right now?
I'm not American. I'm an American, and I believe that we have wonderful entrepreneurial energies, wonderful creativity, and wonderful technology. But it's always thrived in collaboration with other countries. When we were an underdeveloped economy, Ford, Edison, Carnegie, all our great entrepreneurs that established the oil, automobile, electrical industries stole from Europe. That was, everybody said they stole from Europe, that they sent spies into European companies and brought back crucial insights that made possible the Ford automobile. It's what we see here from historic terms is merely the incumbent established technology power of the United States challenged by an ascendant challenger, China, and we are trying to beat them back. And that's a terrible, suicidal mistake for the United States to make. So I'm being pro-American when I say America's got to deal with Huawei and with the existence of challengers around the world. We're not in the lead in semiconductors anymore. This idea that we have some impregnable lead in semiconductors that we can use to negotiate, force China into compliance with some requirements that we imagine. is wrong. We don't lead in semiconductors. Taiwan leads us in semiconductors. Apple's new CPU had to be made in Taiwan. 7-nanometer geometries were not feasible at Intel anymore. I mean, it's just false that the United States is in an impregnable position. It doesn't have to collaborate with China and other countries around the world. It's an illusion from years gone by, and we've got to get over it if we're going to accept the challenges of the future and accomplish the goals we have.
But with the elections, okay. After that, Mr. Chen too. Okay.
总体来说呢，美国的
I
科
think
学技术
generally
是比
speaking,
中国先进和发达。
US still has more leading and very advanced technologies than China. China is still catching up, and in the past 30 years of reform and open up, China has achieved a lot of progress, but US has been developing in the past 100 years, and that is the accumulation of 100 and 200 years. US has a very solid foundation for innovation and creativity. So it's a bit like the water at the upstream, and the upstream water will flow downstream. If there is no water from upstream to downstream, then the downstream will go quite stark. I mean, without downstream, upstream will also have problems because the market in those downstream places will also play a critical role for the upstream. That is what history tells us. And for our society, the society is marching towards open cooperation. That is a definite trend. Why the world adopt market economy? Because market economy have a balance of different factors, and this balancing of factors is managing a healthy or maintaining a healthy and robust development of the market. Think about it. If there are a lot of rabbits, and if there is a lion, then there are so many rabbits for the lion to consume. So I don't think the world plays by jungle rules. And also, countries are governed by laws, regulations, beliefs, religions, and ethics. All those restrictive factors will make sure the world will not follow jungle rules, and there is anti-monopoly law. If the lion gets quite strong, then the lion can only get so strong, not any further. Well, that is a natural balance of different forces. Well, Huawei happens to be leading in 5G, and we will not be complacent. We still want to openly collaborate with the world. So first of all, I think you mentioned the decoupling. I think both sides will suffer. No one will win. I understand. Nature is, the forest is big, and there are different factors playing in the forest, like rabbits and lions.
That you can not only survive, but also thrive after this round of crisis. 听起来好像华为已经早想明白了，活下来，然后活得更好。
So it seems like Huawei has figured out a way to thrive, survive. Well, I don't like the way we depict the world by jungle rules. Why the human society can be so advanced? That takes collaboration and cooperation. So I don't think that is the jungle rules. Talking about Huawei, a lot of people pay a lot of attention, and they believe Huawei is now under unprecedented pressure. But I don't think this is the biggest pressure in our history, because the biggest pressure was the time when Mr. Wrenn founded the company. We didn't have money, we didn't have people. I remember back then only Guoping was the second one joined Huawei. At that time we had nothing, but we managed to develop to what we are now. So I don't think the pressure is the biggest that we face in the history. We will face the issues as they come, and we will deal with those issues.
If things are not as challenging as all of you illustrated, I feel so happy as a journalist. But now, here's another thing. We could not only just concentrate our conversation on Huawei and the current specific point of challenge, but rather where we're going from here. Every one of us. Mr. Ren has been very passionate about 5G. That's certainly going to build the infrastructure in the world to empower communication and many others. Mr. Gilder has been, over the years, arguing about that artificial intelligence is not going to replace human being, but human capacity and also human brain is enormous. Meanwhile, Mr. Negroponte, you have been arguing in many of your speeches and books about the biotech is the new digital, as you have written a book, Being Digital, back in the 1990s.
It's the
Everybody
old
read
digital.
it. Yeah, well, and you argue even that we can probably eat a pill from now on and learn Chinese, not through the eyes, but through within the body. So what kind of future?
You don't really say that.
Yes, I do.
Yes, he did. He talked about French,
I
learning
say
French.
it. That doesn't mean it's true.
It certainly isn't true, so I'm glad that...
But it could be.
No, it couldn't be.
Yes, well...
No, ideas are not
Let's
material.
start.
That's just a fundamental misconception that...
Nor are pills, once they get into your bloodstream.
Yeah. So let me ask one by one if we can. And Crossfire is also welcomed here on this stage. About where are we talking about and what would you concentrate about the bigger trend? Let's start from what many call a futurist. Mr. Gilder?
I believe that the basic challenge of the world economy today is to address the scandal of money. We today have $5.1 trillion every 24 hours of currency trading. And this currency trading accomplishes nothing except to endow central banks with the right to steal from the future in order to consume in the present, and steal from future generations. And I believe that the real reason for the trade war is not trade or industrial machinations. It's the collapse of money. So $5.1 trillion a day of currency trading is 25 times all global GDP. It's 75 times all trade in goods and services. And it doesn't even prevent constant hedging of every transaction across a border. It doesn't prevent trade conflicts. It doesn't really accomplish its goal.
Okay.
And so I think that the great contribution of blockchains is to allow a new global currency that plays the role that gold played for hundreds of years of the fastest growth of the world economy. And that's really what blockchain, not only a new internet architecture, but also a new global architecture for the world economy.
And you don't think that's virtual wealth only, just like the stockbrokers?
It's not wealth itself. It's the measuring stick of wealth that guides entrepreneurial visions and creativity. You got to have a measuring stick, just as you need to measure the second, the kilogram, the ampere, the mole, all the various measuring sticks that make it possible to make a chip in Taiwan and incorporate it in a smartphone in Shenzhen and send it to Cupertino for marketing and to Israel for amplification. And all that is made possible by common measuring sticks. The nanometer is the same in Shenzhen as it is in Timbuktu. But money, which is a critical measuring stick, is different all around the world. It's being manipulated by national central banks. And so we have a chaos of money. And that's why the world economy is slowing down now, is why trade is no longer growing, why countries are constantly fragmenting and fighting over valuations. And I think this is the big opportunity. I think Huawei can play a key role in surmounting this challenge.
We'll let Mr. Ren to respond a bit later. But for you, Mr. Negroponte, of course you disagree with your friend.
No, I don't disagree with that because I don't know enough about that. And it's fascinating to listen to. I would take, because I believe the question was, what are some of the big future trends? And I think they all surround one aspect of the scientific and technical world that has changed in the past 30 years. And that is that we can make things and design things and build things that are so small and get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller that there's been a crossover point with nature. And when I grew up, the natural world and the artificial world were very different. In fact, I was trained as an architect, and good architecture is the architecture that fits well with the natural world. But now the natural world and the artificial world are the same. And they're the same in ways that are very surprising. When I founded the Media Lab, I never imagined we would have a team, as we have today, who design mice. They design new mice. And are the mice real or are they artificial? They're manufactured. And they're walking, living mice. And so there's certain things that you think about. For example, 10 years from now, maybe Huawei will ship base stations as seeds that you plant. And you water it. And it grows. And guess what? It grows into a base station. And it's powered by the sun and the leaves, and it sort of generates. And all of a sudden you have base stations in the middle of nowhere. 10 years from now, that's perfectly plausible. So I think the changes, the reason I say biotech is the new digital, more because of synthetic biology and the fact they'd be indistinguishable. So I look in that area.
And the world of the digital is also in combination with the world of biotech.
Very much the same.
Yeah. 任先生很开心，觉得种子长的这件事情可以
We're
谈论一下，
growing
可以讨
from
论
a
一下。
seed is something that you can discuss.
Be happy about that idea. What about your future? What do you think?
Nicholas was talking about the convergence between DNA and electronics, and what might be the dramatic consequences and outcomes on human society. So I don't comment on that because I have not done any research into that. But I think in the next 20 to 30 years, for human society, the biggest driving force will be artificial intelligence. Because the society is getting more and more complicated, the trains are traveling faster and faster. Networks are also becoming more complicated. This is simply something that one individual with whatever level of intelligence cannot control and keep pace with. In the future, so some of the tasks with certainty, AI could do that. It's already processed by AI. You don't transmit it through the network for things that are not certain, and then you use AI as assistance to provide analysis. AI might be wrong, AI might be right, and it's a process of deep learning to optimize human society. I mentioned just now we should be tolerant about innovation. We should not be very particular around whether this is right or wrong as for something new. Some people are talking about remote maintenance. Whether people have to climb on the tower to do maintenance, that's high cost. So for the future innovation, there needs to be certain level of tolerance in order to embrace the great era that is yet to come. AI should not be solely viewed as something negative. AI is the extension of the human capability, like taking a pill. And then you read all the Dream of the Mansion, and then you take another pill, you read all the works of Shakespeare. And you can take 4 pills at the same time, right? I think the brain power of an individual is that big. It's limited. But if you resort that to electronics, the capacity is enormous. There's no limit to that. So AI can only be produced with a supercomputer and a high-speed transmission. Nicholas mentioned just now several decades earlier, someone already put forward the idea of AI, but today we have the condition to make it happen that can only produce more wealth, and it's not about replacing people. Some people mentioned just now how AI could appreciate human or music. If you listen to the song, it's not just about that. You need to appreciate the music. Whether AI can produce something similar to top musician, I cannot tell for now. I can tell right now, it seems the teacher and the student have certain chemistry.
Between the so-called teacher and the student. Mr. Gilder, it seems that they are disagreeing to a certain extent with what you just said.
Well,
我可不是挑事儿啊。
I've been studying connectome studies for a while. And the connectome, for years I studied the connectome of the internet. That is, how large are all the connections all across the entire global internet and connections to all its memories. And I was always focusing on the point where the connectome of the global internet would pass a zettabyte. That is, all the memories and all the connections would take a zettabyte, 10 to the 21, to map. And recently I've been studying the connectome of the human brain, one human brain. And the connectome of the one human brain takes an entire zettabyte. In other words, one human brain has as much connectivity as the entire global internet. Yet the entire global internet consumes gigawatts, terawatts of energy. One human brain runs on 12 to 14 watts of energy. So I believe that what really will determine human progress and prosperity is unleashing individual human zettabytes running at 12 watts. That's 6 billion of them that you're interconnecting through Huawei fiber optics and wireless, not creating some super mouse out of a pill. I mean, the life is not the same as electronics.
Okay.
It manifests electronics, but it's a different phenomenon which is not well understood and is not illuminated by facile statements that we're going to be able to read Shakespeare by taking a pill. That just is not illuminating.
Mr. Negroponte, I think it's perfect time for you to speak out.
Look, whatever is true in computation and connectivity, I can make more of it. I can make more and more of it. And some of that's going to happen naturally.
More.
So a lot of people have worked, and there are really two distinct AIs. There's the AI, if you will, that wants to do as well or better than the human brain. That's the one that is, I'll call, the classic one. It's the one that the people in the 1960s and 70s, very deep thinkers, were thinking about. It was not an AI composed of 7.5 billion people. I don't know what you guys are doing with the other 1.5, by the way, when you talk about connecting everybody. But when you have the 7.5 billion brains connected, you have something times 7.5 billion. And that's a different area and a fascinating one. And whatever happens computationally, I just know I can make more of it. I can't make more of the human brains, and ours aren't going to change that much. So things will change, George. And I think, you know, when I say you learn French by taking a pill or Chinese, that is part of a very different agenda of how do you interact with the human brain. And the breakthrough was the idea of going from the inside instead of the outside, instead of trying to radiate. What if you went through the bloodstream, and what if you were able to access all the neurons from that direction? That's pretty interesting. And I don't know where French lives. Does it live in a part of your brain? Probably not, but the process to speak French certainly does. Can you put that there? Can you take it away? It doesn't matter whether that is correct or not right now. It's certainly a very exciting way of thinking about it, and people will do things and change things as a consequence taking that kind of step.
Pill or not pill, that is not the question.
Right.
The really question is, what are we going to see in the future? So let's talk about the future also a little bit more. For example, lifelong learning, Mr. Ren. 终生学习
Lifelong learning
certainly is going to be extremely important for everyone, no matter what kind of future we're talking about. So to all of you, how does that happen? What is the best tool? What is your way of lifelong learning? I'm sure you have to learn very fast, particularly recently.
但是不管你学得这么快，你不如机器快。
No matter how fast you are not as fast as machines. No matter how long you commit yourself to learning, your life is always limited. So we think AI can inherit the human civilization. The way scientists think can be inherited through certain mathematical models. The way of thinking of Einstein can be inherited in hundreds or even thousands of years down the road. Therefore, I think AI is going to create enormous opportunity for humanity. But how the opportunity looks like, we cannot depict for now. It's like when I was young, when I was a kid, there's no way that I can imagine there would be so many cars in Beijing, because in 1958, once we have one day off from school, and then we went out to the road to see the trucks because we seldom saw them. Well, today we see a lot of traffic jam no matter where you are. So similarly today, it's hard for us to imagine how future society will look like. But I think lifelong learning is an incentive to one individual. But learning at a general level, you need to have a lifeless succession. And that would be done through machine learning, through understanding algorithms, constant review, revisiting, and optimizing mathematical models. That's how this wisdom would be inherited. One day or another, simple ways would be used to understand the sophisticated problems. Today, there are so many sophisticated problems. In the future, maybe very few people will be able to figure out those big, difficult questions. So, to me, the issue of lifelong learning should not be discussed at an individual level. It should be broadened out to understand the lifelong learning for society, and it should be transnational and across different disciplines. For people in our generation, we have this notion of geopolitics because when we were young, we never traveled outside of our county, our city, not alone, let alone our country. Only when we grew up, we went to another county. We have this notion of being tied to certain location. But for the young kids, they are not tied to any location. Since they are born in internet era, ideology is being diluted among the young generation. So that you need to have a new way of learning. In light of the future society, I think it's going to be brighter. It's not going to be darker. Some people might try to approach AI from an emotional point of view. That's only in the literature. In society, you have laws, you have a relation, you have moral ethics, and many other ways to try to counterbalance some of the possible negative consequences of AI. We think wealth would only grow, not really decrease, with the right tools. Some people are saying the Chinese people are getting rich, and people now like to eat fish. But if you look at the Google map, there are this fishing net in coastal areas. If you use Google Map, a lot of fish, they use man-made way of raising fish. So it's not coming at the cost of natural resources. So it's a science or technology innovation to create a new wealth. Of course, I think the society should be a society of economy instead of a luxury. Norway is a country that is very developed. But what impressed me the most is Norway people, they live in small apartments, they drive the small cars. While our rep office in Norway, they cannot afford to use their own cars. So when I go to Norway, I take a train to visit our rep office. So that's the practice of economy. So on the one hand, there is abundance of wealth, but people precise economy, not really try to enjoy something luxury. And people's ability to create resources would be stronger, and I don't think a war is possible.
You mentioned not just lifelong learning, you also mentioned how the society can continue to improve.
Before I go to you, I'll have Mr. Chen first. Okay? I'll come back to you. 刚才
看的
Well, I think they take a very long-term view, maybe after 30 years. I will only talk about the day I envision for the next 3 to 5 years. So Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, China Mobile, and Vodafone, what I want is we work together to deploy 5G as soon as possible. My son went to the United States to watch NBA games. I support Canada Raptors, and he supports the Warriors. So if the network is already very good, then we will be able to enjoy the basketball no matter where you are.
It's an interesting world, isn't it? It's a bigger world than many people imagine. Good job. And Mr. Gilder.
It's not bigger than the universe and Ren's cup of coffee. It's really, we get a sense of his visionary horizons when he discourses on AI. I don't think any other corporate leader in the world could give such a sophisticated and wide-ranging analysis of this absolutely central theme of technological development. And that's why the United States has to come to terms with Huawei. It's a resource for the world. It's not a little combatant figure dealing with backdoors and little security.
Mr. Gilder, you really sound quite a fan of Huawei.
Yes.
Mr. Negroponte.
Well, your description is certainly poetic, amongst other things, which is very important. I would like to go back to your original question, which was about lifelong learning, and I would like to just remind people that learning is what you do to yourself, and education is what people do to you. Let me just separate the two. And if you look at the best education in the world, it falls in two very distinct groups. There is the group which is characterized by Finland, Sweden, and Norway, where they do very, very well, but there are no tests, shortest hours per day, shortest days per year, and no competition at all. So the kids do very, very well. And then there is, since I'm in China, let me say the Chinese method, which is drill and practice and test, and you probably kill 50% of your children in the process of doing that. But the ones who survive come out strong. Now, I think the second one is a very bad way to do it. And I think the first one is the one that the world will slowly model itself. It doesn't have much traction. But as you connect kids, thanks to Huawei, and as you bring this connectivity to very remote places, it's amazing what kids can do. And I will bore you with one experiment we did. We went to 2 villages in Ethiopia that had no literacy. No adult had ever seen a word, a written word. They hadn't seen one. And we put in the village the number of tablets as there were kids with no human beings and no instructions. And we left. Now, the one exception is an adult went the day before and showed another adult how to put the solar panel outdoors instead of indoors. That was it. Remotely, we could monitor this. Within 2 hours, the kids found the on-off switch, which is pretty hard because there are no on-off switches in their life. Within a week, they were singing ABC songs. Within 2 weeks, they were using 50 apps per day for 7 hours per day. That's how long the battery. 6 months later, they hacked Android. And today they speak, read, and write fluent English. No teacher.
Without the pill.
No pill, before the pill, and no teacher. What's very important is that you can do a great deal of self-learning. I don't advocate that's the way to do it for everybody, but it's amazing what kids can do, and we underestimate them all the time.
Beautifully
That's
said.
the zettabyte I was talking about.
Finally, you agree on something.
Oh, we agree.
I feel so relieved.
We agree on many
Yeah,
things.
most things.
Okay, but there's one thing I also want to ask you about. That is, you know, you talk about the potential beauty of a world in which everybody could work together, going through this current bump, but it is happening, and therefore, a lot of people that I've been talking to as a journalist have real concerns whether their children's generation are really going to enjoy the kind of life that you guys have been enjoying over the decades, which is you see your life taking up, going up, getting better. Your life's getting better all the time. But maybe the next generation, some are concerned, are not going to be as beautiful as that. Mr. Negroponte, you've been working with kids a lot. $100 laptop for them to go to the world of digital. What do you think?
Well, let me...
It's actually a question of optimism or a little bit pessimistic.
Right, but in full disclosure, I was born very lucky. My parents were rich, their parents were rich, and their parents were rich. Everybody went to college. Everybody traveled. We moved all over the world. I'd gone to 30 countries by the time I was 4 years old. So I didn't think of that as privilege. And none of my brothers went into business. We all went into civil service or academia.
Right.
A couple of them are artists. So our measure wasn't the same measure that you're talking about, because very often we think of measure simply as an economic growth. But after you have that economic growth, you have a purpose. And you die unhappy if you didn't really have a good purpose, and you look back at your life and you say, oh, what was that all about? Well, some people don't have that question because they've had a purpose and they're allowed to have it. But if you're struggling the whole time, it's harder. So I think that when I hear that young people won't have the same opportunities, I say to myself, well, you know, I don't think that's necessarily true, because they do have something we didn't have. Didn't matter if you were rich or poor. There was a belief that you had to work for a certain period of time and probably hate your work.
Okay.
As a lawyer, as a banker, as a hedge fund. I mean, God, hedge funds, what an empty life that is. And then at the end, you start doing something with the rest of your life. There's sort of something happens. And I think young people have learned that that too can be more integrated. And I see many, many more young people who have mixed money and meaning.
Okay.
And I think that's the key.
That is the key. No offense, hedge funds around the world.
Well, offense hedge funds,
Yeah,
actually.
okay.
You should be ashamed of yourself if you're in the hedge fund business.
To support education.
Yeah.
That's very important.
That's important.
Mr. Ren, 任先生，您认为呢？我们未
Mr.
来
Ren,
的
what do you think?
这些孩子们，他们的生活会像您这一代一样，
Kids,
一直感觉在
will
不
the
断的
kids-
成长，不断的变好吗？
Will be able to experience their life will keep getting better. But I think we have to understand the definition for happiness.
Question. We have about 2 minutes.
因为为什么呢？人类是一代比一代强。
Because I think future generation will always be better than the previous one. We shouldn't be pessimistic about the kids at the current era. Maybe they haven't been through all the difficulties we had, but they are quick learners and they are quick to absorb new knowledge. Like Professor Negroponte mentioned, if poor kids can also receive proper education, then mankind will have a stronger capability to generate more wealth and get themselves out of poverty, and the world will be a wonderful place, a better place. So I'm very pessimistic and positive about the future, and I believe the future generation will definitely be better than previous generation. Well, think about it. You can't say our current generation is definitely, our current generation is definitely better than the generation 5,000 years ago, right? I agree with all of them.
What about you, Mr. Gilder?
I think it's a foolish indulgence of rich people to believe that the future will be worse than the past. If you just look at the history of China over the last 50 years, of course every subsequent generation has had vastly more opportunities than the previous generation. All around the world, equality is increased because of poor people becoming rich everywhere. It's just in America with our foolish worship of nature and other peculiar climate cranks and weather bores and other ideas of disaster that we imagine that the future will be worse. But if you live in the world and have some sense of history, you see opportunities opening as wide as Huawei's visions.
Mr. Gilder, I understand you have very different views compared to, for example, Mr. Negroponte about climate change issues. But we'll leave it that to another round of discussion, okay? But for now, let me open the floor, since I've been taking advantage of this conversation on the stage so much. But I know there are a lot smarter minds sitting in the audience, and they have much more fascinating questions than the ones that I just asked. So, but no pressure, by the way. So let me just turn to our audience, who are, I understand, make of, the media people, people coming from the think tanks, friends of Huawei or business partners of Huawei, and those who are interested in the latest development of technology that are sitting in the audience. So any one of you have questions, raise your hand, and our staff going to bring you the microphone. So why don't I do an equal opportunity, okay? So this gentleman first. This gentleman first. Yes. And then we go there, and then we go there. Okay.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I have two questions, actually. One is for Mr. Ren, and one is for Professor Negroponte.
And could you promise it's not going to be a 5-minute speech, but rather a question?
Okay.
Okay, great.
Two questions. So My first question is, I've been making videos that talk about Huawei a little bit and try to get the discussion to be a little bit more fair, especially with American public. And so my question for Mr. Ren is, will Huawei focus on the relationship with American people or more with the American government or both or neither? And which is the most important? And then my question for Professor Negroponte is, we know that that America has a open capitalist system, and we know that China has a capitalist system which is governed by the government. But now we're starting to see that America may be turning away technologies that are the best, right? So what happens in a situation where an entity starts to shun or turn down the best technologies? Thanks.
Thank you. Quickly 咱们快一点给到答案。
我觉得呢，就是我们也关注美国的民众，
Well,
也关注。
we focus both on the communication with American people and also American government. Because no matter it is which individual or organization that make a wrong judgment, that is only for a short period of time. And generally speaking, the judgment is correct. For example, during the World War II, U.S. has sacrificed a lot, and in the past decades, U.S. has made great efforts to drive the social development and also make a great contribution to the world. That proves that the U.S. is also a great country, and American people are also great people. They are diligent, they work hard, they study hard, and they contributed a lot of basic theory and drive the development of science and technology for the time being. We may be restricted in the U.S., but that doesn't mean in the future or future generations, the future generations will work together, maybe on 8G or 100G, not 5G. So I think ultimately we still want to serve American people. Well, Negroponte, he's talking about 8G.
Gee, this G stuff is a little overrated. I think the answer to your question is perhaps best, because whatever is closing off now, we just have to stop that. Okay, so there's no trying to prepare for it. We have to stop it. 27% of MIT students come from Asia. I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to be willing to guess over 20% come from China. If you count the Chinese Americans who are born in the United States, but both parents are Chinese, the number goes up perhaps to 30%. So we have enormous numbers. You look at the Media Lab, it's 60% foreign students. So when I look at that and people say, well, wait a minute, you're training our competition. No, we're elevating the whole world. It's so old-fashioned to think that if you have something, I don't. And so you're going to take my thing, and so you have it and I don't. Unfortunately, President Trump thinks that way. He doesn't think in the way that we can both have it, and it can elevate and can go up. And training those foreign students is so, so important. Now, I made a mistake 20 years ago. I thought the Internet was going to make people more integrated. I thought it would get rid of countries, and some they would get rid of nationalism. And what happens now? I look around, and it's gotten worse, not better. So I was wrong. So the only thing I can suggest now is intermarriage. Persuade your kids to marry somebody who's not Chinese, okay? And that will help going forward.
Okay. Well, that's a social issue. We're going to discuss that a little bit later. Okay, let's go to this gentleman over there. Yeah, please.
No, I can't hear you.
Hello? Yes?
Hey, this is Gavin from Bloomberg News. Question for Ren. Sorry, I'm gonna use.
Can you raise your voice just a little bit because we're a little bit far? Yeah, thank you.
This is a question to Mr. Ren. You mentioned $30 billion decrease in this year next compared to Huawei's plan. I want to ask, what's your specific plan for the future? We saw earlier that Huawei was in the business of undersea cable, which went for sale, whether Huawei would spin off more businesses for sale in the future. And in the next 1 or 2 years, what measures are you going to take to alleviate the pressure you are under? We will not have a spin-off or business for sale for the undersea cable. It's not a decision we just made recently. We wanted to sell the business much time ago. We already sold some of the equity to the management team and other employees of that company. Actually, we were quite successful in that business. It's not because we were attacked and the business went badly and we sold it. It's not that way. We thought that's not part of our core business. That's why we decided to sell it. And for the other businesses, we will not have a spin-off or sale. We might shrink our size. And for the people that we can reallocate our people from a non-core business to core businesses. Huawei will not reduce our headcount substantially, but the business consolidation has been ongoing. One typical example is about 2 years ago, we restructured our carrier software business. That was a team of 20,000 employees, and they spent $10 to $20 billion without producing something compelling. So we decided to shut that business down, and I was concerned of emotional changes in the minds of our employees. So I talked to HR, increasing the salary of those employees before we made the restructuring. But those people get themselves into new positions in other growing businesses, like a consumer business, like a cloud business. I think a lot of credit for the growth of those businesses should go to the people who used to work in carrier software team. And recently, I went to check on those employees. I found that those people did not wait for the salary increase before they moved themselves to the new businesses. They were there trying to get a new opportunity. I think that's a very good spirit. And that's why we had a ceremony to commend those employees. The business team suggested they could have 10,000 employees walking on the red carpet, and then they said, you don't have a long enough carpet, and then they said 3,000. That is okay. And they also come up with medals. And the medal does not look beautiful, but Eric Xu said you made a speech to them. That's a big incentive to them. So we actually did a very big restructuring of a 20,000 employee team, and there was no really unrest whatsoever within Huawei. And today, for many of the businesses, we're also doing this restructuring, and we have already started.
All right, thank you. I hope I answer your question. And this direction, yeah. This gentleman, then I go to that one. Yes. 来，这边这位先生的，哎。
Thank you. I have a question.
Would you help us to understand who you are, and would you ask the question, please?
Yes, I'm Esteban Buzo, a professor at the Harvard Institute of Technology, ancient graduate from MIT, where I met Professor Negroponte a long time ago. I have a question concerning the research efforts that Huawei expects to do in the future, especially now in terms of the Sputnik moment that Professor Negroponte mentioned, and how is Huawei going to address the issue about basic research, which you mentioned also is an important ingredient for the future creation of knowledge, and also the issue with the creativity difficulties that the educational system has in China to support this basic research effort.
Mr. Ren? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Ren.
我认为呢，就是我们永远都愿意给所
I
有
think
的科学
we'll
家、
always be willing to work together with the universities and
我们给大学
scientists.
使用的是美国的拜杜法案。
We follow Backdoors Act of the United States in working together with universities. We make our investment, but we not seek any achievements from the partnerships. Those outcomes belong to universities and professors. And we don't even want our names to appear on any papers that they end up with. It's okay that certain universities don't work with us right now because there are so many other universities out there. You know, 5G is very much hyped right now. Some people even believe 5G is like an atom bomb. 5G started from a paper of a Turkish professor about 10 years ago. And it's not a paper from MIT. It's a paper from a Turkish professor. Of course, that professor is a student of Shannon. It's a student from MIT, though. So there are so many universities out there. There will always be someone who wants to work with us, and there are talented people, exceptional people that we can work with. So we will not give up what we are committed to because of short-term setbacks.
Make sure you raise your hands during the answer session so I can see who you are. Please, over there. Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a bit about China and innovation. How dependent is China's innovation system on its integration into the global innovation networks that have developed over the last few decades? And will China still be able to produce cutting-edge innovation if trans-border collaboration is substantially reduced? And that's a question for Mr. Ren.
Also for Mr. Ren.
Yeah.
You want to keep the other gentlemen relaxed.
I'd like to hear their views if they'd like to share their views too.
Okay, Mr. Ren, 还是请您来回答。
我认为中国现在的这个创新啊，
I think innovation in China today, even though some people think there's a lot of a boom, a lot of innovation, in fact, is application innovation, building upon a global innovation network. If there is no such global platform, that would be a big setback for China when it comes to innovation, because China has challenges when it comes to investments in basic research and basic education, and that will take time. So back to your question, I hope government departments would really carefully think about it.
Okay, anyone want to add up to that?
I just think that China is doing all sorts of innovation and basic research. You know, collaboration with a professor in Austria called Zeilinger with Professor Pan, I think, or is leading Chinese innovator in cryptographic research, the first use of quantum entanglement in transmitting messages absolutely securely across distances over satellite technology. I mean, there are just all these areas where Chinese are performing both basic research and applied research in many different ways. So I think this, all these beliefs about some failure of innovation in China are out of date. There are people talking about what it was like 20 years ago, and I just don't think that's the situation today in China.
And today, of course, we heard the great news coming from Professor Tu Youyou's team. There are new development in her area. Of course, she's a Nobel Prize winner. Let's go to a question over there, and then we have one more on the second line, and then we have two questions from there, okay? So quickly.
没有声音是吗？
有了。
好的。那个任总你好，我是中国国际电视台 CGTN 记者。
I'm from CGTN. I have a question to you, Mr. Wrenn, regarding IPR. We know many U.S. media are saying that Huawei stole a lot of business secrets and IPR from Western companies. What's your response? Right now, Huawei has more than 50,000 5G base stations. Are you going to use that as a weapon?
第一点呢，华为成立
Starting from the very beginning, Huawei has behaved ourselves. Even if we were small, we have a very strong business ethics and integrity. Otherwise, we cannot come to where we are today. Even though there are several IPR litigations with the U.S., we need to believe in the court rulings of the United States. I think that's basically fair. The claims on Huawei theft of IPR, that's not possible. Second, we do have a lot of IPR. Whether we're going to use that as a weapon, we won't. But intellectual property is created through our own hard work. Therefore, it makes sense to have a cross-licensing and pay to get the legitimate use of intellectual property. Many big companies pay IPR royalties to Huawei every year. We have an NDA agreement, so we cannot tell you which companies are those. But we will not use IPR as a weapon to hinder the development of human society. Over the past years, we were not aggressive seeking IPR royalties to companies that use our IPR. That's because we were busy pursuing our business growth. Once we have more time off, we may try to get some money from those companies who use our IPR, but we will not be as aggressive as Qualcomm. Are you busy now? I think we're still busy right now.
We have one. Let me just collect the.
这个起了好多次手了。
I think there's one person who raised
the question. 我现在把咱们大家的问题集中一下 because we only have 8 minutes left. Why don't we collect all these questions and then we let our panelists to answer them together? Is that okay? Is that fair? Okay. 好，我们。Okay. So you don't want to ask question. You want to refer to that lady. Okay. 来给她一个话筒。好。 Very quickly, please say who you are and your question, please.
Sure, I'm a reporter with the Washington Post.
If you want to stand up so that they can
sorry,
see you
I just
really.
have a computer on my
thank
lap.
you, ma'am. Yeah, because you're behind the camera.
I'm a reporter with the Washington Post. A question for Mr. Wrenn. There was a report today that Huawei is expecting a 40 to 60% drop in its international cell phone sales. I just wanted to confirm whether that's true. And can you also clarify the status of U.S. suppliers? Are most of your U.S. suppliers not supplying you at this point, or are they continuing to because of the 90-day reprieve, or what's the status?
手机怎么样卖的？第二个是我们美国的合作公司还给不给我们
also the business situation with Huawei U.S. suppliers. Then we move on. We collect more.
You've been raising your hands. Who are question?
Thank you very much. My name is Sharice Pham. I'm with CNN. Question for the whole panel. I'll start it off with Mr. Wrenn. You talked about the internet generation and how ideology has not been diluted, and the future is going to be brighter and not darker. And you also talked about using Google Maps to look at how fish is farmed around the world. Very interesting. I am curious about your views on China's vast censorship apparatus, which has blocked Google's search and map functions in your country and other U.S. and foreign tech. Can the future still be as bright as you envision when you have a whole generation that has been sort of walled off for them that kind of information? And some people in China pointed out that, you know, this walling off was sort of inviting back retaliation eventually. You say your thoughts on that. And for the rest of the panel, too, just related to that question, Mr. Gilder and Negroponte, you've talked a lot about advocating the U.S. to be more open to collaboration. Should China also be more open to relaxing its censorship and moving away from what they call a sovereign internet policy?
Okay, open or not, countries around the world. Let's go to other questions. Yes, please, this gentleman. 这边这位男士，哎，咱们把问题都一起问了，然后我们再统一回答啊，这样快一些。
We're going to collect two questions. 我想问任总一个问题啊。
Hello, I'm from Tian University. I have a question for Mr. Wrenn. We know Huawei is not just a Chinese company, but also a global company. You have footprint around the world. And Professor Negroponte mentioned around a large percent of the students come from Asian countries. And what's your plan to attract global talents?
Next one, that gentleman, 这位。
喂，我是来自中国国家高端智库，是中国综合开发研究院。
Hello, I'm from a Chinese think tank.
在当前，
So I have a question for all three of you. Previously, you mentioned that open collaboration is very important. However, facing the disruptive situation across the world, well, for technology companies like Huawei, is it possible for Huawei to seek alliance with other international companies?
I don't know which third road you're talking about. Certainly, what's the new way of cooperating, right? If there is some difficulties. Okay, I think we're running out of time. I'm so sorry. We have everyone almost wants to ask a question right here, but we have 3 minutes left, so let's go through this very quickly. 咱们就剩3分钟的时间啊，咱们来说一下手机是不是会大量下降销售量，然后与此同时，是不是也希望是有一个更加开放的空间
？And also open collaboration, the room for open collaboration in the future, and how to cooperate in the future. Well, the reporter from the Washington Post asked whether the sales of a cell phone dropped by 40%. Yes, it dropped by 40%. But the growth in Chinese market for smartphone is very fast. This is the first thing I want to clarify. And open and collaboration will never change. But for the government-led cooperation, that is pretty much depend on the governmental dialogues. So this is my answer for the second question. And is there a third path to forge collaboration? Well, it never crossed my mind. There is only one path. We believe there is one path, and we will go through this path in a very dedicated manner. If we suffer minor setbacks, we will continue to forge ahead. Well, another one is about how we be able to attract the global talents. Well, we have talents around 170 countries. We have around 30 to 40,000 local employees in all these countries. I don't know the specific number in specific countries, but for the number of global talents, indeed we do have a rich pool of global talents.
I think there's been a lot of talk about the Internet of Things, but what's really critical now is to create an Internet of Facts, an Internet of Trust, an Internet of Transactions. And my life after Google is about how trust can be recreated by new technical solutions through blockchains and cryptography and other advances that luckily the whole new generation of technologists are now pioneering. So many of these political problems tend to dissolve when new technical solutions are presented. And I think Huawei can contribute vitally to the Internet of Trust, which at the same time will make it possible for Huawei to sell its products in the United States again.
Mr. Negroponte.
Well, I will focus on the CNN question because there's something that's happened in the past couple of years which has led up to the recent events, which frankly is an anti-Chinese sentiment that has been created in the United States, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And part of the blame goes, if I may say, to your current president, who's disappointed us. We expected China to liberalize and continue, and we saw a path, and that changed suddenly. And that is disappointing. And we do have to get rid of the tariffs. We have to do all the things that George and I would love to see happen, but China does have to change. You can't continue, fencing off the internet. And, I arrived in this hotel, or at least the hotel down the street, and many of my apps didn't work, and I couldn't do things on Google, and it was infuriating, truly infuriating. And it was a reminder that I was here, and it was a very sad reminder. So that has to be changed. But I'm still going to advocate open research. Always, Just it has to be open. And if it's not 100% symmetrical in the beginning, it will be.
You've been talking about open science and global connectivity. So we have 1 minute left, 1 minute only, ladies and gentlemen on the stage. 我们只有1分钟的时间. Everybody, one sentence only, the biggest takeaway with the coffee with Ren today. 最大今天喝了咖啡之后的收获是什么呀？我们请 Ms. Chen, you go first.
好
One sentence, 一句话吧。
3句吧。
Allow me to have 3
刚讲华为
sentences.
是不会有任何
First of all, we mentioned Huawei will definitely have no backdoors, and our products are open, transparent, and trustworthy. But we'll always open our front door. Through the platform with media, we welcome media to come and see us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gilder, one sentence or 3 short sentences, as Ms. Chen just did.
I think this Huawei is at the epicenter of the future of technology in the world, with how the United States and other countries react to this campaign against Huawei is kind of a Huawei test for people around the world. And if they don't pass it, it will signify that the world is taking a very destructive turn, anathematizing particular companies in the name of vague ideological objections. And so it's the Huawei test, and I hope the world meets it.
It's an interesting and important case study, I guess.
Yeah.
Mr. Negroponte.
Yeah, I guess I would end by saying in going through that test, I would not focus on security and backdoors and whether you're going to interact with the Chinese government if they can. Leave that out. And I think you should focus on the 100,000 papers you publish, the amount of research, and just make it known. Because I feel I'm a lone voice. I'm at a dinner party and I say, Huawei is a great company. And people say it is. It does. And then the world has to know how much you're doing in science and technology.
Well, I guess the media need to know too, in a way. Now our colleagues are sitting here. They all got informed, at least through this, a little bit. Mr. Ren, it's a coffee with Ren, so you have to speak first. 最后您说句话。
我觉得这个世界就是合作共赢。
I think the world student has to go through open cooperation. That would be my one last sentence. Open cooperation. Well, that's simple and not simple.
The four of you.
He gets an A+ as my student.
He did? For the very first time.
谢谢。你看，我比球成绩好一点了。
好，不错，这次考试都很好。And with that, we're wrapping up today's first coffee with Ren. We hope there will be many coffees to come in the future in which we can talk and interact and certainly be intellectually stimulating for one another. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen on the stage. 谢谢. And our great audience and colleagues. 谢谢，我们拍一张照片吧，好不好？ Let's take a photo together. We love photos.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's panel, and I would like to thank our panelists for flying all this way to their thoughts and insight. I also want to thank our audience for coming together and spend the time and join us. Okay, so I hope that in the very soon in the future we can welcome you again at Huawei, and you can come again to have a cup of coffee with Mr. Ren. Okay, thank you and goodbye.